so years, and more aggressively the last. So a second agent. So two, okay, my left, and in fairness to them.
I am back. This has been a while since I've been able to bring anything to you. My life's a little bit hectic, but this particular episode is going to be one of my more consequential episodes because we're starting to get into some nitty-gritty stuff. Okay, the objective of this podcast is to expose those hidden manipulations that those in power have over us and that we're unaware of. And over the last decade plus, we have become increasingly more susceptible, dumber, less informed, more polarized, because the information we get is controlled by algorithms. So this particular episode, it's called Americans Are Suckers, the myth of the liberal left and the conservative right. And basically, we're going to talk about the fact that left and right has been used to manipulate all of us. There are basically three pillars that the powers that be use to manipulate us. One is religion, the other is race, and the last is politics. And those three pillars are what polarizes an entire nation and makes us dumber because we're able to be put into our silos of learning, or lack thereof, I should say, which makes us more susceptible to the powers that be. Okay? Those guys control you by manipulating those pillars and pulling on those levers.
You are really great and powerful. You keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh, the great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
So that you guys can be suckers and they can do whatever they need to do and get whatever they need to get out of you because you guys believe these mythical things that they use and the algorithms use, like those levers that they use to make everybody blind. Okay? And the idea is to be aware enough to know that you're being manipulated. And that's really a lot of what this podcast is all about. Okay. So, back to the pillars, right? So they use politics, religion, and race to control your minds, put you in information silos so that you can be easily manipulated. That's the easiest way, is to use these two-dimensional thought processes that we are used to using, that makes us dumber, that allows them to use the algorithms to manipulate you. Okay. So one of those levers that he's pulling on, that he's telling you not to pay attention to the man behind the counter, is politics. And that's the one we're going to talk about today. The myth of the liberal left and the conservative right. So let's first take a look at the definition of these things you guys call liberal and conservative. Okay. Let's do liberal first, right? Liberal principles. Okay. So let's look at this, for example. Okay. So individual rights, okay, equality before the law, limited government, sounds familiar, right? Okay, consent of the governed, market economy, rule of law again, right? Tolerance, and secularism. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at what conservatism or the principles of conservatism say. Okay, so limited government, free enterprise, tradition, individual liberties. That's what I mean. There's a lot of these that are overlapping. Okay, the only one that kind of doesn't, well, really the two: national defense and conservative social values, whatever those mean. Okay, but even those are manipulable because what does that really mean? Okay, so basically, what we just saw is that a lot of these principles we call liberal and conservative overlap. Okay, a lot of those principles are listed in each side. Okay, so, maybe 20 years ago, there was a more coherent or cohesive argument towards what we call liberal and what we would call conservative. But now the lines are completely blurred, right? And it's super obvious because we've just gotten so dumb, we can't even see how contradictory all of these things are. Okay. For example, let's talk about the liberals first, right? What is it to be liberal? Well, like you said, you saw on the list, right? A lot of those values overlap with left and right. Okay, so liberals. People used to say liberals meant like being aware of the forces coming after you. Okay, tolerance, being willing to listen to others, caring about allowing others to live a more fruitful life, those kinds of things. Well, okay, so tell me, what then is liberal about supporting or defending a government that's lying to you when we're talking about COVID, right? We know that Fauci lied about gain of function research and other things regarding COVID. But those on the left were defending the government, Fauci, to the nines. Okay, that's not a liberal principle, but they were doing it, right? Um, what about having people listening to people's ideas and being okay with people having different ideas, right? Well, let's talk about one of the biggest reasons that started cancel culture as a phenomenon on the right, where they could actually use it and weaponize cancel culture. It was this incident at Evergreen College with Brett Weinstein. He is a evolutionary biologist, if I'm not mistaken, and he was at this school. And if I'm not mistaken, there is a day where the students felt like they should be allowed to miss school, or they shouldn't go to school, or classes shouldn't be in session because of some socio-racial uh, some socio-racial tradition that they had developed. Okay, so I'm going to play you a little bit of that because it kind of leans into what we're talking about here.
You are trying to win. Dialectic means you are using disagreement to discover what is true. I am not interested in debate. I am interested only in dialectic, which does mean I listen to you and you listen to me.
We don't care what terms you want to speak on. This is not about you.
I'm talking all about him.
On terms of white privilege. This is not a discussion. You have lost that one.
I am talking about terms that serve the truth. Those are the terms.
House of dialectic. You said some racist shit. Can you apologize?
I did not. You don't know. Emails and target students of color.
Nothing racist about his.
Do I think that black students in sciences are targeted here? Do I think they're targeted anywhere?
Speak to what you know and speak.
Okay. I do not believe that students of color are targeted in the sciences here.
Why?
But maybe I misunderstand what you mean by targeted. Oh my God.
Get the fuck out.
So wait a second.
What mic so we can hear?
To me, targeted means something different than what I just heard you define it as. I do not believe that anybody on our faculty with intent specially targets students of color.
Exactly. Fuck what you gotta say.
Public protest, was that not targeting people of color?
I'm sorry.
Due to
I
an
didn't-
absence for people of color.
I didn't hear you at the beginning. Could
Your
you start over?
protest of day of absence, your presence taken as a protest, if
Yes.
you will. That's what you said in your email.
Yes.
But you're
That
saying it's
targeting
targeting
black
black
for black students. and
May
people of
I
color.
answer
Is
that question?
I mean, I'm answering an opinion.
Okay, wait a second. First of all, day of absence has been here longer than I have. I have never protested it until the idea, until
you
no.
Keep your fucking ass here.
No.
Well, he did.
First of
We
all-
have the email.
First of all, I didn't say.
And but students that don't want to show up, they don't have to show up, but they got pissed and freaked out and started shouting and banging and protesting, and it became a big thing. Well, this is where kind of like the right was able to manipulate this counterculture idea, because the left wasn't being the left. If the teacher wanted to have class and people didn't show up, they just didn't show up, right? But protesting an exchange of ideas is not one of the principles that we consider to be on the left. That's what I'm telling you. Like the left and the right, they're whatever it's made out to be by the forces controlled by the people that are using it to their own ends. Like they just make it up as they go, right? So to me, this is not a left way to behave. This is so they will even come at him harder than this. But it was a big deal. Okay, and it kind of like went super viral, and it gave those on the right ammunition, because this is not a left, quote unquote, left type of behavior. Okay, now there is no cancel culture. I mean, or unless you're able to use it for both sides, right? Because you can't get more cancel culture than lynching runaway slaves, or you can't get more cancel culture than COINTELPRO that puts down any possible movement that they don't like, specifically black movements, but also anti-war movements, right? So you can't get more cancel culture than that, or slavery, for example, right? And they talk about identity politics. No one has played more identity politics than the people who want to keep the power in the place where it's always been. And you'll understand more what I mean by that as we go along, okay? But also on the left, okay, people who don't want to accept the philosophy of trans people, okay? Now, I understand, and me personally, if you want to be called something, I will call you that, because that's what you want to be called, and I believe that, my objective is to try and make your life as good as possible, as long as it doesn't infringe upon my rights. So I'm willing to call you whatever you want to be called, even if I don't believe in it. Okay, now some people don't believe in it, and they choose not to believe in it, and there's some scientific reasons why. Well, if they don't believe in it, you don't get to shout them down. You don't get to treat them like crap. You just hear out the argument and you make your own point. Okay, so that's not a left principle, right? Not allowing someone to call, like making it a federal crime that you don't call people what you don't believe they should be called. Okay, now it may be rude, but it's not a federal crime. It is an idea that needs to be debated. It's a fairly brand new idea, and there are significant biological arguments against it. So Also, on the left, there is some level, and this is where a lot of the lines are getting blurred recently, because a lot of the people that I thought were quote unquote intellectuals or people who were in pursuit of knowledge, there's two things in the last decade that have thrown a lot of that off. There's the MAGA revolution, and then there's the Israel lobby revolution. And half of the left is pro Israel, and it's very confusing, even though they're committing genocide and doing anti-left like things. Or yeah, I'll call it a genocide because that's it's really more like ethnic cleansing, and it's geopolitical um replacement, ethnic replacement. And this is their time. This is their time. They've got the guy in office who's manipulable and blackmailable. So they've got the person and they feel like this is their time to do it. But anyway, my point is that is also not a left thing to agree with. But a lot of people who call themselves on the left are pro-Israel. Okay. So now, please, now we're going to go to the right, and please do not make the mistake of thinking that I am making an equivalent between those who say they're on the left and those who say they're on the right, and how much damage has been done to our country, because there is no possibility of inequality between the two. The people who call themselves the right have become the most susceptible, the most short-sighted, and the most manipulable, and that's caused the most harm to our quote unquote government. That's, it's not the type of government you thought it was, but it's done the most harm to our body politic and our humanity as a consequence, because their objectives aren't anywhere near what conservatism is supposed to be about. For example, okay, the type of person we put in office, is it conservative or not to put a person in office who we already knew was a racist from the 70s, right? I would say that's not, I mean, it's in practice, it's kind of conservative, but in the conservative framework, it is not typically, it's more a radical idea to put a guy who we know is racist. Remember, back in the day, anybody who even sounded like a racist was not electable. Okay, all of a sudden, it's a feature and not a bug. Okay, but he's the only one that we knew for sure was racist because of all the stuff that he's been caught doing. All of his employees said that he used the N-word freely, and his dad was caught at KKK rally. So there's clear evidence that he was a racist, or a classic American racist, because I did an episode about that before. Go ahead and listen to it so you understand what I mean by that. But anyway, but that's not conservative, right? That's radical. Okay, supporting out of control spending nonstop because you think it's going towards what you think you want it to go towards, like this Gestapo militia, like called ICE, that is murdering people on the streets, right? Is that conservative or is that radical? Yeah, that's radical. Okay, family values. Well, you elected a guy who's the least concerned about family values, and we know it for a fact, right? Sleeping with porn stars and hanging around with Jeffrey Epstein and being his wingman for at least a decade. Okay. So obviously we know that the guy that you guys elected over there is not at all family values, right? I mean, I don't even know how these people got past grabbing by the pussy, right? For me, if a guy tells you that he's willing to grab your daughter's hoo-ha because he can get away with it because he's a celebrity, to me, that's fairly unelectable. And if it was conservative, if it in terms of conservative and liberal, that is radical, because who would say 20 years ago that they would elect someone who told you that he's willing to sexually assault women because he can get away with it? So that's radical, right? That's not conservative. Okay, pardoning criminals who try and overthrow the government, is that conservative or is that radical? Okay, clearly, right? Supporting a person that literally cannot Not that he doesn't tell the truth. He simply cannot tell the truth. It's impossible. He can't do it. Right? Is that conservative or is that radical? Right? Supporting a guy who puts troops on the streets. I saw a video of a pundit who calls himself a libertarian defending ICE murdering people on the streets the other day, and I'm like, bro, you're supposed to be the most against that kind of stuff. So, libertarians are kind of like slanted towards right wing, but my point is that all of this shit is bullshit because you will use the labels for whatever you want them to. And the people who are controlling the strings, right, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain, will use you because you're so easy to manipulate and actually believing in the opposite of what you say you believe in. Just like I'm pointing these things out, that these things are the opposite of what conservatism is and what liberalism is. But you guys are doing it because you're so manipulable. Okay. The fourth, right, defending a guy. Are you conservative if you defend a guy that violates the First Amendment, right? Deporting people who defame Charlie Kirk's name, is that conservative or is that radical? It's radical. Okay. Is it when you support a guy who investigates anybody who speaks out against him, is that conservative or radical? That's a radical idea, right? The Fourth Amendment, right? We have a Constitution. The Constitution is supposed to be the backbone of our whole society, okay? If you defend a guy who breaks all of these, right? The First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, okay? Due process, okay? ICE is literally lying to people, telling them they have warrants when they don't, going in their houses, taking them out without due process, right? Fifth Amendment, violating that. Is that conservative or is that radical? That's radical, okay? 10th Amendment, violating states' rights, going in there, okay? You have your federal Gestapo murdering people on the streets of Minnesota, and then you go in there illegally. Murder's a state crime, okay? You don't get to take the murderer out of the state, hide him. That's called accessory after the fact. That's also a federal crime. Okay. So commit crimes after the crime has been committed, violating states' rights. What is that? The 10th Amendment? Yeah, that's the 10th Amendment. Okay. So that's also aiding and abetting murderers, felons, right? So don't tell me that you're conservative if you defended any of that stuff, because you're not. You're radical. Okay. Now, I am pointing these things out to illustrate how absurd it is that some people call themselves on the left or on the right, and then they have behaved in these ways. Okay? So, that's the whole point of illustrating this stuff, not to make you feel bad about yourself if you defended it, but you should, because you are a hypocrite and you are not what you say you're supposed to be. What I'm going to express to you is actually what conservatism and liberalism are in this country, and it has very little to do with any of those principles that I showed you earlier. It has to do with a concept that is old as humanity, and it is called the haves versus the have-nots. Okay? Now, most of the time, the have is reserved for those people who have actual power, who have actual economic resources, wealth, money, right? But another thing in this country that the haves consider is a concept that doesn't even exist called race, right? It is a have to be able to call yourself white or to defend your whiteness or to make sure that your whiteness persists, okay? That's also a have. And conservative versus liberal, that's the basic foundation of what it actually means. The haves, which is the conservatives, versus the have-nots, which is the liberals. Okay? The conservatives want to keep the power, the money, the access to resources in the hands of those who have. And those who are liberal are those who want to kind of spread the wealth around, allow more people to have access to the American dream, have equality in terms of how you treat people. Some people will call it equality of outcome. No, it's the idea is the equality of opportunity, right? That's what the left is supposed to be about. So the concept of right versus left has been bastardized over the years to manipulate you guys into thinking that it's about all this other crap, right? Military strength and fiscal conservatism. There ain't been no fiscal conservatism. The conservatives have ballooned the national debt more than any other group. Okay. And you still keep voting for them, right? So that should tell you that you don't believe in the principles you say you believe in. Okay. You can't call yourself a conservative and vote for the guys who are violating the Constitution 6 ways to Sunday every time you elect them, lying about wars and getting us in more wars, just lying to you guys illegally. Okay. Do you guys realize that a president cannot unilaterally declare war, right? But guess what? We are in one unilaterally. Congress didn't approve it. It is a crime for him to do so. It violates the Constitution. Is that conservative or is that radical? It is radical. Okay. So anyway, the idea of conservative and radical and liberal, the idea of conservative and liberal really comes down to the haves versus the have-nots. That's the basis of it. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. So the window dressing that they put on it for you is to manipulate you into doing what they want you to do. Okay, military spending. That's what they want you to do. So they added that into somehow the framework of what's conservative. Okay, when the military can't account for 63% of the funding that they get, right? Military spending is that it is just manipulation, and we'll get more into that as we go. Okay, now the liberals are the have-nots. Okay, it's as old as humanity. Haves versus the have-nots. Okay, the ones who have the money, the power, the wealth, the whiteness. Those are going to tend to be the people who defend conservatism, and that's the basis of it. Okay, it's